Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. I think a lot of us, maybe even most of us these days, feel overwhelmed sometimes. Like we're
Sure.
constantly juggling a million things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Juggling and dropping a few along the way.
Exactly. So today, we're diving into a concept that I think can be really helpful for anyone who feels that way, and it's called essentialism.
Interesting.
At its core, essentialism is about living by design, not default.
Okay, I like that. By design, not default.
So instead of just letting life happen to you and reacting to whatever comes your way, it's about being really intentional with how you spend your time and energy.
So it's about taking control, basically.
Exactly. And it provides a framework for identifying what truly matters most to you,
Got it.
and then eliminating everything else that's not essential.
Okay. So less but better, kind of.
That's a great way to put it. It is about doing less, but doing those few things exceptionally well.
I can see how that would be appealing, especially for people who are feeling stretched thin.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, our main source is Greg McKeown's book, Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less.
Oh, I've heard of that book. Heard good things.
Yeah, it's full of great insights. And our mission today is to distill those key ideas, give you a clear understanding of what essentialism is all about, and hopefully help you walk away with some actionable takeaways that you can apply to your own life. Sound good?
Absolutely. Let's do it. I'm ready to get less overwhelmed.
Me too. Okay, so McKeown starts by really contrasting the mindset of an essentialist with someone he calls a non-essentialist. It's kind of like two opposite approaches to life.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the non-essentialists, they tend to operate with this I have to mentality. They feel obligated to say yes to everything, like they don't have a choice.
Right. I have to do this. I have to go to that. I have to please everyone.
Exactly. And because of that, they end up spreading themselves way too thin.
They're trying to be all things to all people.
Exactly. And their actions really reflect this mindset. They're constantly reacting to whatever's most urgent at the moment.
Always putting out fires.
Yeah, exactly. They say yes without really thinking about it.
Yeah, that knee-jerk yes. I've been there.
And then they end up really struggling to actually get everything done.
Because there's just too much on their plate.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with the essentialist. Their mindset is much more about choice.
Choice. Okay.
They believe that only a few things are truly important, and they're willing to say no to everything else so they can focus on those vital few.
Interesting. So it's not that they can't do everything. They're choosing not to.
Exactly. It's a very deliberate approach.
Yeah.
They pause before reacting.
They took that time to think it through.
Yep. They discern, is this truly essential? Does this align with my goals and values? And if it doesn't, they say no.
That can be a really tough thing to do, though, saying no.
It can be, especially if you're used to saying yes to everything.
Right. People-pleasing and all that.
But the essentialists, they're okay with disappointing people in the short term if it means staying true to their priorities in the long run.
So it's a long-term perspective.
Definitely. And they don't just say no, they also proactively work to remove obstacles that are preventing them from doing those essential things.
They're streamlining their lives.
Exactly. Making things as effortless as possible. So what's the outcome of these two different approaches? The book argues that the non-essentialist, even though they might be incredibly busy, they often end up feeling really unsatisfied.
Unsatisfied, even though they're working hard. I can see that.
They're overworked, they feel out of control, and they're just constantly exhausted.
Yeah. And probably not even accomplishing the things that are most meaningful to them.
Exactly. And ultimately, that leads to feeling overwhelmed and burnt out.
Right. It's like they're on that hamster wheel going and going, but not getting anywhere.
Exactly. Now, to really bring this to life, McKeown shares a personal story early in the book that I think really illustrates this trap of non-essentialism.
Okay, what happened?
So he's at the hospital right after his daughter was born.
Oh, wow. What a special moment.
It should be. But instead of just being present and savoring that time with his wife and new baby, he's glued to his phone, feeling this intense pressure to attend a client meeting.
Oh, man. Come on. Can't that wait?
You would think so, right? But one of his colleagues even joked, although maybe it wasn't really a joke, that having the baby on a Friday was bad timing because they needed him at this meeting.
That's messed up.
And, even though his gut was telling him to stay at the hospital, to be with his family, he still ended up going to the meeting.
He gave into that pressure.
He did. And it's something he deeply regretted later. He realized that he had chosen to please others instead of honoring his own values and priorities.
That's a tough lesson. But a good one, I guess.
It is. And it highlights how easily we can fall into this trap of trying to please everyone and say yes to everything, even when it goes against what we truly value.
Yeah, we've all been there, I think.
And this doesn't just play out in our personal lives, right? This whole non-essentialist approach is really prevalent in the workplace too.
Definitely. Work is where a lot of us feel the most pressure to do more, be more, achieve more.
Exactly. And McKeown describes this common pattern he's seen, where a really driven, talented person starts out with a clear sense of purpose. They achieve some success. And then that success actually becomes a problem
How so?
because it leads to more and more opportunities, or maybe we should say demands, coming their way. They get a reputation for being someone who can get things done, so everyone wants a piece of their time.
Oh yeah, they become the go-to person.
Exactly. And they end up trying to do it all. They take on too much. They spread themselves too thin. And ultimately, their efforts become really diluted.
So instead of making significant progress in one direction, they're making tiny bits of progress in a million directions.
Exactly. They're constantly busy, but not really accomplishing anything meaningful.
Right. And then they feel overwhelmed and exhausted, and the cycle continues.
Exactly. And I think it's really helpful to understand why this non-essentialist mindset is so prevalent these days. The book points to a few key factors. Well, one of the most obvious is just the sheer number of choices we have to make every single day. It's absolutely overwhelming.
Yeah, the paradox of choice. Too much of a good thing, I guess.
Exactly. Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant, he said that this unprecedented increase in choice is perhaps the most significant event of our time. But as a society, we are completely unprepared to manage it.
That makes sense. We haven't developed the skills to discern which choices are truly important.
Right, and all of that decision-making leads to what psychologists call decision fatigue.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
The more decisions we have to make, the more our mental resources get depleted.
And the worse our decisions become.
Exactly. And on top of that, there's all the social pressure. Thanks to technology, it's easier than ever for people to share their opinions about what we should be doing, how we should be living our lives. It's not just information overload anymore, it's opinion overload too.
Opinion overload. Yeah, that's good.
It's like everyone has an opinion about what we should be prioritizing. And if we're not careful, those external pressures can really drown out our own inner voice.
It's so easy to get caught up in what other people think we should be doing.
Exactly. And the danger, as the book highlights, is that if we don't actively and deliberately choose where to focus our time and energy, other people will end up choosing for us. Our bosses, our colleagues, our friends, our family.
Yeah, and before we know it, we're living a life that's not truly our own.
Exactly. And I think this quote from Bronnie Ware, an Australian nurse who worked with people in their final weeks of life, is really powerful. She found that the #1 regret people expressed was, "I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me."
Wow, that really makes you think.
It does, and it highlights how essentialism is not just about saying no to the obvious time wasters. It's about strategically eliminating even good opportunities that are not truly essential to our core goals and values.
It's about making choices that align with our deepest sense of purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, a really central idea in essentialism is the power of choice.
Okay, choice. We all have choices, right?
Well, the book argues that it's not just something we have, it's something we actively do. We might have different options available to us, but choosing is an action.
I see. So even when we feel like we don't have a choice, like we're stuck in a situation, we still have the power to choose how we respond.
Exactly. We might not be able to control everything that happens to us, but we can always control how we choose to react.
That's empowering.
It is.
Yeah.
And the author, he shares a really insightful personal anecdote about this.
Oh, what's that?
So he went to law school, but when he really thought about it, he realized that he had chosen to go almost by default. He didn't actively choose law school. He just passively didn't choose not to go.
So he kind of just went along with it?
Exactly. And that realization was a major turning point for him. It made him realize how powerful consciously making a choice can be, even if that choice is to say no to something that seems like a good opportunity.
Right. Sometimes the best choices are the ones we make by not doing something.
Exactly. And this leads us to one of the core principles of essentialism. Less, but better.
I like that. Quality over quantity.
Exactly. The book connects this idea to the Pareto principle, which is also known as the 80-20 rule.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. The idea that 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort.
Exactly. And it applies to so many different areas of life. The book also mentions Joseph Juran's law of the vital few, which essentially says that a very small number of things are responsible for the vast majority of our results.
Interesting. So it's really about identifying that vital few and focusing our energy there.
Exactly. And the book gives some really great examples of this in action. Like Warren Buffett, the famous investor, his approach has actually been described as bordering on lethargy.
Lethargy for billionaire investor.
I know, it's counterintuitive. But he makes very few investments, and when he does invest, he puts a lot of resources behind those few carefully chosen companies. And 90% of his wealth has come from just 10 investments.
Wow. That's incredible. Proof that less can definitely be more.
Absolutely. And the book points out that essentialists, they're willing to invest extra time up front to really explore their options and identify those vital few.
So they're not rushing into things.
No, they're taking that time to really discern what's most important so they can ultimately do less but achieve significantly better results.
That makes a lot of sense.
Another really key concept in essentialism is the idea of trade-offs.
Trade-offs, like you have to give up something to gain something else.
Exactly.
Oh.
And that's the core of strategy. It's about making deliberate choices and accepting that certain things will have to be sacrificed in order to achieve what's most important.
Right. You can't have it all.
Exactly. And the book uses the example of Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
Their incredible success was built on a very essentialist approach. They made some very clear trade-offs.
Like what?
No meals, specific routes, and low fares.
So they focused on what they did best and didn't try to be everything to everyone?
Exactly. And the airlines that tried to do both, to offer some low-cost features while still trying to be a full-service carrier, they often struggled.
Right. They diluted their focus and ended up not being very good at either.
Exactly. Another powerful example is Johnson & Johnson's response to the Tylenol crisis back in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. When someone tampered with the product and people died.
That's right. And Johnson & Johnson, they made the decision to prioritize customer safety over immediate financial impact. They issued a nationwide recall of Tylenol, which cost them over $100 million.
Wow. $100 million. That's a huge trade-off.
It is. But it was a decision that was guided by their core values. Their credo explicitly put customers first and shareholders last.
So even though it was financially painful, it was the right thing to do.
And it ultimately strengthened their brand in the long run.
It shows they were willing to put their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. And, while making trade-offs can sometimes be difficult, the book really emphasizes that it significantly increases our chances of achieving our desired outcomes.
Because it forces us to be more strategic and deliberate in our choices.
Exactly. We have to say no to certain things in order to say a more powerful yes to the things that truly matter.
Right. And it's about being okay with that.
Exactly. Now, the book itself is structured around 3 key parts.
Okay, tell me about them.
First, there's essence, which is all about developing that essentialist mindset we've been talking about.
Got it, the foundation.
Exactly. Then there's eliminate, which focuses on actively removing the non-essentials from our lives.
Okay, getting rid of the clutter.
Exactly. And finally, there's execute, which is about making those essential things happen as effortlessly as possible.
So the action phase.
Exactly. And the book really emphasizes the importance of that first phase, explore. It's not just about jumping into cutting things out. It's about taking the time to really understand what's most important in the first place.
Right. You have to know what to eliminate before you can start eliminating.
Exactly. And that exploration often involves things that, in our culture of busyness, can be seen as distractions or even weaknesses.
Like what?
Like having space to think, taking time to observe and listen, allowing ourselves to play, getting enough sleep, and being really selective about what we pay attention to.
Yeah. Those things can feel like luxuries when you're constantly running from one thing to the next.
I know, right? But the book argues that these are not luxuries, they're absolutely essential.
Essential for what?
For being able to discern what truly matters, for being able to make those tough choices and to focus on the vital few.
Okay, that makes sense.
So let's dive into that first element of exploration, creating space.
Okay, creating space. What does that mean exactly?
It means creating both literal and mental space to just think, to disconnect from the constant barrage of information and stimulation that we're all bombarded with every day.
Yeah, we're all so connected now. It can be hard to find any quiet time.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes how crucial that dedicated thinking time is. It mentions the D School at Stanford, where even the furniture is designed to encourage movement and interaction, breaking away from those traditional passive learning environments.
Interesting.
And they have a class there called Designing Life, essentially, which focuses on creating scheduled time for students to think without distractions.
So they're actually teaching people how to create space for thinking.
They are. And it's really about developing that skill.
Right, because if you're not used to doing it, it can be hard to just sit and think.
Exactly. The book gives some interesting examples of people who've gone to great lengths to carve out uninterrupted thinking time. Like there's this story about a senior executive who would book a flight just to have a few hours of uninterrupted time to think on the plane.
Wow, that's commitment.
It is. And then there's Sir Isaac Newton, who famously spent a period of time in solitary confinement during the plague. And that's when he came up with his groundbreaking work, Principia Mathematica.
Interesting. So sometimes you need to really isolate yourself to do your best thinking.
It seems that way. And even McKeown himself, he used what he called monk mode when he was writing Essentialism.
Monk mode? What's that?
He basically set up these email auto responses explaining that he was in monk mode, completely unavailable, so he could focus on writing.
I like that. Maybe I need some monk mode.
I think we all could benefit from it. And one of the things the book points out is that this kind of deliberate focus has become increasingly rare. There's this quote from a Twitter leader who talks about the disappearance of boredom.
The disappearance of boredom, that's kind of sad.
It is, but it's true. We're constantly stimulated, constantly connected, and that makes it even harder to create those pockets of space for thinking.
Yeah. But the book's argument is that the faster and busier things get, the more we need that thinking time, right?
Exactly. It's counterintuitive, but it's true. Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, he schedules up to 2 hours of blank space on his calendar every day.
Blank space. I like that.
And he considers it his most valuable productivity tool. And Bill Gates, he famously takes a week off every year for what he calls his Think Week. He just goes off by himself, reads, and thinks about big picture stuff.
Wow, that's impressive.
And the book also suggests that even something as simple as reading classic literature for the first 20 minutes of the day can be a way to create that mental space and broaden our perspective.
Yeah, starting the day with something thought-provoking.
Exactly. Now, another key aspect of exploration is look.
Okay.
It's about developing the ability to see what truly matters amidst all the noise and distraction.
That can be hard to do when you're constantly being bombarded with information.
It really can. And it brings to mind that quote from T.S. Eliot, "Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? We have access to so much data, but are we really seeing what's truly significant?"
That's the question.
And the book shares this lesson that Nora Ephron, the famous writer and filmmaker, learned in high school. She was told by her teacher to always focus on the central point of a story.
The core essence.
Exactly. And the book gives this tragic example of Eastern Airlines Flight 401.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember reading about that.
So the crew, they became so fixated on a faulty landing gear indicator light that they lost track of the plane's altitude and ended up crashing.
Oh, wow. So they were so focused on one small detail that they missed the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that's a really powerful reminder of the importance of being able to filter for what's truly important, to see the forest for the trees. The book also talks about Thomas Friedman, the journalist, who says that he listens for what others don't hear and focuses on what piques his interest.
So he's looking for those hidden gems.
Exactly. And essentialists, they listen deliberately. They read between the lines. They're not just passively absorbing information. They're actively trying to discern what's most meaningful.
Like Hermione Granger in Harry Potter, always looking for the hidden clues.
Exactly. Now, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but the book makes a really strong case for the importance of play in the exploration phase.
Play, like as in having fun.
Exactly. And the book defines play as doing something purely for the joy of it, not as a means to an end.
Okay, so not playing to win or to achieve something specific, just playing for the sake of playing.
Exactly. And the book shares some really compelling research from Stuart Brown, who's dedicated his life to studying the importance of play. He's found that play has a profound impact on our physical and mental health, on the quality of our relationships, and on our ability to learn and be creative.
Interesting. So play is not just frivolous.
No, not at all. It's actually essential for our well-being and for our ability to thrive. Brown even argues that play leads to brain plasticity, adaptability, and creativity.
Wow. That's powerful.
It is. And the book gives some fascinating examples of this in action. Like, even in the animal kingdom, playfulness seems to be crucial for survival. There's this example of grizzly bears that play, and the ones that play the most are actually the most successful at hunting and surviving in changing environments.
So play is not just about having fun, it's about developing skills and adaptability.
Exactly. And remember that famous quote from Einstein, imagination is more important than knowledge? That really speaks to the power of a playful mind.
Definitely. And play is also a great antidote to stress, which we all know can really impair our ability to think clearly and make good decisions.
Absolutely. And the book talks about how play actually reverses the negative effects of stress and has a positive impact on our brain's executive functions.
Like what?
Things like planning, prioritizing, and self-control. All those things that are really important for being an effective essentialist.
Right.
And the book even lists some key breakthroughs in history that happened during times of play,
Like what?
like Columbus realizing that the Earth is round.
Oh, yeah, that was a pretty big breakthrough.
Haha, it was. And Watson and Crick discovering the structure of DNA. And countless artistic breakthroughs, too, like Shakespeare's plays, Mozart's music, Einstein's theories.
So play is not just for kids.
Definitely not. And a lot of really innovative companies, they recognize this, and they create playful environments for their employees.
Like who?
Like Twitter, they offer improv classes. IDEO, they hold meetings in a converted microbus. Google, they have all those playful decorations and games in their offices. And Pixar, their office designs are famous for being really creative and inspiring.
That's cool. I'd love to work in an environment like that.
Me too. And, the book really emphasizes that play is not trivial. It's a vital driver of creativity and exploration. And it's essential in itself.
So we should all be making more time for play.
Absolutely. And the book suggests that a good way to do that is to look back at our childhood memories of play and try to bring some of that spirit back into our adult lives.
I like that. I think I'm going to try that.
Next up in the explore phase is sleep.
Ah, sleep. That's always a tough one.
I know, right? It always feels like there's not enough time for it. But the book aptly describes sleep as protecting the asset.
Protecting the asset. I like that.
And it quotes Gandhi's perspective on sleep. Each night, when I go to sleep, I die. And the next morning, when I wake up, I am reborn.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
It is. And the author shares his own experience of trying to cut back on sleep, thinking that it would make him more productive. But he realized that it actually had the opposite effect.
It backfired.
Totally. He found that when he wasn't getting enough sleep, he just wasn't functioning at his best. His thinking was cloudy, he was more irritable, and he was more likely to make mistakes.
Yeah, sleep deprivation is definitely not a good thing.
It's not. And there's a lot of research that shows that sleep is actually crucial for peak performance. The book even mentions an article that shifted the author's whole perspective on sleep.
Oh, what did it say?
It argued that sleep drives peak performance and cited all these high-achieving business leaders who prioritize getting 8 hours of sleep every night. It even mentioned Bill Clinton acknowledging mistakes that he made when he was sleep-deprived.
Interesting. So sleep is not a weakness, it's a strength.
Exactly. And the book really challenges that common belief that sleeping less means achieving more. Research actually shows the opposite, like K. Anders Ericsson's research on violinists, which is often cited to support the 10,000-hour rule.
The idea that you need 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert at something.
Exactly. But his research actually emphasized the importance of focused practice, not just mindless hours of repetition, and that rest and recovery, including sleep, are essential for effective learning.
So it's not just about the quantity of practice, it's about the quality.
Exactly. And the book mentions a study from Lübeck University that found that a full night's sleep can actually double our problem-solving abilities. It allows our brains to process and restructure information in a way that we can't do when we're awake.
Wow. So sleep is not just about resting our bodies, it's also about letting our brains do their work.
Exactly. And even short naps, especially if they include REM sleep, can enhance creativity. It's like giving our brains a little time to make new connections and come up with fresh ideas. And, high performers, they understand this. The book mentions Jeff Bezos and Mark Andreessen as examples of people who really prioritize sleep and see it as a competitive advantage.
I guess if you want to be at your best, you have to be well rested.
Exactly. Now, the final element of Explore is select.
Select, okay.
It's about applying highly selective criteria to the choices we make. It's about being really discerning and only saying yes to the truly exceptional opportunities.
So not just settling for good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The book gives this great example of Vitso, a furniture company that has a really rigorous and selective hiring process.
Oh, wow. What do they do?
Well, they start with phone interviews so they can focus on the person's skills and experience without being influenced by their appearance.
Interesting.
And then they have multiple in-person interviews, a trial workday, and even questionnaires for the team to assess whether the person is a good cultural fit.
Wow, they're really thorough.
They are. And they prioritize finding the right people over filling positions quickly. Aaron Levy, the CEO of Box, he has a similar high bar. He asks himself, could this person have been one of the founding members of the team?
That's a good question to ask.
It is. And the book mentions Nancy Duarte's communication agency. They used to be a generalist firm, but after reading Good to Great, they decided to specialize in presentation design.
So they went from doing a lot of things to focusing on one thing that they could be really great at.
Exactly. And the book introduces this really helpful 3-question framework for applying tougher criteria to our choices.
Okay, what are the questions?
First, what opportunity is being offered? Second, what are your minimum criteria? And third, what are your ideal criteria?
So it's about going beyond just considering the surface level appeal of an opportunity and really digging deeper into whether it truly aligns with our goals and values.
Exactly. And for career decisions, the book suggests asking ourselves these 3 essential questions. What am I deeply passionate about? What taps into my talent? And what meets a significant need in the world?
Those are great questions.
They are. And the book shares the example of Enric Sala, who waited for the right opportunity to dedicate himself to ocean conservation.
Oh, okay.
And that's work that he loves, that he's incredibly talented at, and that addresses a critical global need.
So he found that perfect intersection of passion, talent, and purpose.
He did. So after this crucial explore phase, we move into the second part of essentialism, eliminate.
Okay, eliminate. Let's talk about that.
So one of the key things the book emphasizes is that it's not enough to just identify the non-essentials. We have to actively remove them from our lives.
Yeah.
And the very first step in doing that is getting absolute clarity of purpose.
Okay, clarity of purpose. Why is that so important?
Because without a clear purpose, it's really hard to know what's essential and what's not. And the book actually suggests a really interesting exercise to illustrate this point.
What's the exercise?
You take a bunch of different companies' mission statements and you mix them all up.
Okay.
And then you try to match the mission statements to the companies.
Oh, that sounds tricky.
It is. And the point is that so many mission statements are so vague and generic that it's almost impossible to tell them apart.
So even companies are struggling with clarity of purpose.
They are. And the book argues that this lack of clarity has a really negative impact on teams and organizations.
How so?
It leads to all sorts of dysfunctional behaviors, like playing politics, where people are more focused on getting the manager's attention than on actually contributing to the team's goals.
Right, because they don't have a clear understanding of what the team's goals are.
Exactly. And it also leads to a situation where everyone thinks everything is equally important, which means nothing is truly important.
Yeah, it's all good, which is actually bad.
Exactly. And that's why the book introduces the concept of essential intent.
Essential intent. Okay.
It's about having a really concrete and inspiring purpose that makes 1,000 later decisions much easier.
So instead of a vague mission statement, it's a clear and actionable statement of what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly. And the book gives the example of Martha Lane Fox, who became the UK's first digital champion.
Digital champion, huh?
Yeah. And her essential intent was get everyone in the UK online by 2012.
Okay. I like that. It's clear, it's measurable, it's inspiring.
Exactly. And the book advises against getting too caught up in the stylistic details of a purpose statement.
Like trying to make it sound really fancy or clever.
Exactly. It's about the substance.
Yeah.
And the book suggests asking this question: if we could be truly excellent at only one thing, what would it be?
That's a great question.
It is. It really forces you to focus on what's most important. And the book also emphasizes the importance of having concrete objectives.
Objectives, like specific goals.
Exactly. And it suggests asking this question: how will we know when we have succeeded?
Okay, so it's about being able to measure your progress?
Exactly. And the book gives this great example from Professor Bill Meehan, who teaches a class on nonprofits. He contrasts these grandiose but empty mission statements with Brad Pitt's Make It Right Foundation, which had a very specific essential intent to build 150 homes in New Orleans for families who had lost their homes in Hurricane Katrina.